The city was eerily quiet, a blanket of darkness stretching over every building. I sat by the window, the glow of my candle barely lighting the room. Across the street, under the last flickering lamppost, I saw him. A figure stood still, barely a shadow against the faint light. He didn't move, didn't look away, even as the lamppost went out. I told myself it was nothing, probably a neighbor caught outside when the power failed. Still, I double-checked my locks and slid the chain into place. When I glanced back out, the street was pitch black. He was gone. A strange unease crept up my spine. I tried to shake it off. I focused on tidying up, the silence growing louder with every passing second. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle, just outside my building. I peeked through the window again. He was closer now, standing on the sidewalk in front of my door. My heart raced. I pulled back, extinguishing the candle. The darkness felt safer. Footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Slow, deliberate. I pressed my ear to the door, barely breathing. A neighbor's dog barked, loud and frantic, somewhere above. Then, silence. The footsteps stopped. I grabbed my phone, but the signal was down. Of course it was. My mind raced. I shoved the couch against the door, my hands trembling. The emergency lights in the hallway flickered on, casting weak yellow light through the gap under the door. I froze as I saw it. A shadow, unmoving, blocking the light. Time crawled. I didn't dare move. The doorknob rattled, gently at first, then harder. My breath caught. I gripped a heavy vase, ready to swing. The rattling stopped. Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed outside. The sirens were faint at first, then louder. The shadow shifted. Footsteps retreated faster this time. I stayed frozen until I heard shouting outside, followed by silence once again. I didn't sleep that night. When the power came back, I dared to peek outside. The sidewalk was empty, but the lampost's faint glow revealed something chilling. A handprint smeared on my window. The storm outside roared, battering the windows of the hospital. I stood by the patient's bed, flashlight in hand, the comatose man unaware of the chaos around him. The lights had gone out over an hour ago, and the backup generator still wasn't running. I checked the monitors. Dead. My heart raced. This wing felt isolated, far from the others. Too quiet. A faint noise broke through the silence, a shuffling sound from the hallway. I froze, straining to hear. It came again, closer this time. Gripping the flashlight tighter, I stepped out into the corridor. The beam cut through the dark, revealing rows of empty beds pushed askew. Wheelchairs stood abandoned in odd places as though someone had hurriedly rearranged them. My pulse quickened. I called out, my voice trembling, but there was no response. At the far end of the hallway, muddy footprints smeared the floor. They led to an exit door, slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. That door was always locked. Always. The storm howled louder as I approached. The footprints were large, not like those from any of the staff I knew. I closed the door, bolting it, my breath coming in short bursts. That's when I heard it, a dragging sound, deep and heavy, coming from behind me. I spun around, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The sound echoed off the walls, distant but distinct. I followed it, my stomach in knots. The sound led to a supply closet. The door was open just enough to reveal the edge of a mop handle. I pushed it open, and my heart dropped. The janitor, Mr. Hayes, lay slumped against the wall, wrists tied with duct tape. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. I knelt down, shaking him gently. His eyes fluttered open, panic filling them. "Shh," I whispered, cutting the tape with scissors from my pocket. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. I turned off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness. I could feel Mr. Hayes trembling beside me. We waited, not daring to breathe as the footsteps passed by the closet. A shadow moved outside the door, pausing for an agonizing moment before continuing down the hall. Once the sound faded, I helped Mr. Hayes to his feet. He pointed to my patient's room. I knew what he meant. We had to get there. The dragging sound started again, closer this time. We hurried back, locking ourselves inside. I barricaded the door with a heavy cart, my heart pounding. The noise stopped outside the room. Then silence. Minutes felt like hours until faint sirens pierced the storm. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The footsteps outside retreated, fading into the distance. When the police arrived, they found a trail of muddy footprints leading out of the hospital, but the intruder was gone. I stayed with my patient until sunrise, the storm subsiding as daylight broke. But I never worked a night shift again. The train doors slid shut, and I watched the last car disappear into the tunnel. I stood alone on the dimly lit platform, the hum of electricity overhead suddenly cutting off. Everything went black. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen refused to connect to a signal. I cursed under my breath. My flashlight app cast weak light on the empty benches and dirty tiles. Then I saw him. A man, pacing at the far end of the platform. His figure swayed in and out of the shadows, muttering under his breath. At first, I thought he might be another stranded commuter, but his movements were erratic, his steps sharp and uneven. I edged toward the emergency stairs. The exit was chained shut. A thick, rusty padlock dangled in front of me, mocking my hope. Behind me, the pacing stopped. I turned. The man was staring now, his face obscured by darkness. My flashlight flickered across his figure. He took a step forward. Then another. I backed away, heart hammering. The silence was unbearable, and suddenly he ran. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted down the platform into the maintenance corridor. The sound of his shoes slamming against the tiles echoed behind me, growing louder. I ducked into a small room and slammed the door shut. I pressed my back against the cold metal, struggling to catch my breath. My flashlight swept the room, revealing tools, wires, and an old note scrawled in black marker on the wall. "Don't let him see you." The doorknob rattled. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to stifle the sound of my breathing. The rattling stopped. Footsteps receded, but I didn't move. My chest felt tight, and every sound amplified in the silence. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. Finally, I mustered the courage to open the door. The corridor was empty, but the air felt heavier somehow. I crept toward the platform, keeping to the shadows. The emergency exit loomed ahead, its heavy frame my only shot at freedom. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it against the door. The crash echoed like a gunshot. I swung again, harder this time. The lock snapped, and I pushed the door open. The cold air hit my face as I stumbled out onto the street. Then the power flickered back on. The platform lit up behind me. I turned, breath catching in my throat. He was there, standing just inside the door. Only a few feet away. His face was blank, his hands clenched into fists. I ran into the night without looking back, the fluorescent lights of the station glowing faintly as if the blackout had never happened. But I could still hear his footsteps in my mind, relentless and close.